Hi and welcome to It's About Youth, the show that talks about things that matter to youth. I'm Fahana Shea. Now, on today's topic, we'll be talking about financial literacy among youth. Are youth today making smart financial decisions? Is there a dire need for financial literacy among youth of today, especially given the current economic conditions? So, with us today, we have Noor Bahari from Fly Malaysia, or Financial Literacy for Youth, in short, Fly. Right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Muhammad Bahari. I call you Bahari, right?
Bahari works,
Bahari
Muhammad works.
Right.
Some people call me Momo, so it works.
Okay, Bahari it is. All right, so, it's after Raya, so I have to ask, not to put it in a somber mood, but given, current economic conditions, rising cost of living, do you think Malaysians right now are feeling the pinch financially after Raya? What's your thought on that?
I guess the first thing I would say is Selamat Raya,
Yes,
first of all.
Selamat Raya
to anyone listening.
I quickly go deep into it, but yeah.
But, that's a really interesting question. When I first got the questions, I was thinking about feeling the pinch, right? I feel like we've been feeling the pinch all our lives. I can think of when I was a kid, I've always heard, the economy is not doing too well. And then just thinking about, price rises throughout the years since I was quote unquote in tune with economic developments. In 2015, obviously we had the implementation of GST, prices rose. 2018, the implementation of SST didn't really do much for prices rising. And then obviously we've all gone through the pandemic in 2020, and now we're dealing with sort of the Great Resignation and high inflation. So it almost seems like systemic of the economic system that we've chosen. And if we were to revisit this conversation in 5 years, the 50 ringgit that we have right now would be, we will be able to buy less things than we would today. Inflation isn't necessarily a bad thing too. It's actually a sign that the economy is growing. But, Raya or not, financial literacy is something that we should keep in touch of, constantly, regardless of what the economic climate is, because understanding how to manage, especially economic turbulences, will help us weather that storm. But also when it comes to the basics of financial literacy, the first step is to build, put aside money in which you can build a mattress to fall on in times of emergency. But after that mattress turns into a fortress that yields dividends. So it's sort of a necessary thing to study, much like studying, how to cook. It's just basically a part of living.
It's a survival sort of thing, right? Touching on financial literacy among youth, I have to quote the Securities Commission survey recently back in June. So it says, youths prioritize emergency funds, savings to support family and paying off debts over building wealth and investment, and only focus on retirement at a later stage. It says, majority of Malaysians' youth income is spent on food, household expenses and debt repayment, leaving them with not much balance left for savings or investment. And lastly, it says, on average, only 17% of income is being set aside for savings and investments. Of this, only 8% is set aside specifically for investment purposes. Is there truth in this? As someone who looks into all this, are youth really managing their financing well? And what's the trend actually when it comes to youth finances?
I would say that youths have it really hard, especially when it comes to finances. And I think we're still stuck in the sort of 90s mindset, you just save money and, you'll be fine. But really, this isn't your grandfather's Malaysia, right? And I can think of 3 things essentially. In the 90s, if you put money in the stock market in Malaysia, anywhere, it probably would go up. That's just symptomatic of a country that's industrializing really rapidly, right? And even when we're talking about things like ASB, right now the average dividend yield is 5 to 6%, which is pretty good. That would double in 14 years. But back in the day, the average dividend yield was something like 10%, 14%, which is kind of insane to me. In just, if you put 10,000 ringgit at 1990, in just 7 years, that would be 20,000 ringgit.
Already,
so I think, when we talk about youth managing their finances, I think the issue stems from the current, just general economic climate that we're in, not even the issues that we're facing in 2022, 2023 because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but it's because Malaysia is stuck in the middle income trap, right? So I think that's a wide enough tent to explain why wages are pretty low comparatively globally, and you see people having to scrape by rather than being able to start building those fortresses last. So when we really talk about financial literacy, I'm always conscious of the fact that people simply just can't think of investing when they have to scrape by, especially those who come from all around Malaysia, like especially rural areas to KL. It's just not enough with sometimes the salary that they are getting, from what I hear from friends and peers.
Right, so I guess that brings us to the next question, which is, you mentioned a little bit just now, where does the problem stem from? Is it generally not enough, you say, to save or to invest, or is it probably lack of information to do all this? So which is which? Is it both, or is it one more than the other? What do you think?
I would say the Securities Commission, I think it's called the Youth Capital Market Survey. It's really good. It's really well done. They have about 1,003 respondents, and the demographic is sort of indicative of the wider Malaysian populace. And they cover a lot of stuff, like not enough income was one. But I think one thing we're not considering is how many times you have to break the emergency fund in Malaysia, whether it be suddenly the car breaks down, there's a leakage, or someone, needs to get a hospital bed. I think that was a reality for many people during the pandemic. Also, how young Malaysians probably have to take out 1 billion loans, for the car, for the, housing loan, that sort of thing. But also, you have to take out loans for our phones to start with, because phones are really expensive. It's kind of crazy that, and part of buying these new phones is to keep up appearances. So I think there's something societal there. But for me, I think the biggest issue that young Malaysians face is being risk adverse, right? So, and I don't think a big part of that fear is not unfounded or is not unjustified. And if I could just come back into the 90s again, especially in 1997 when it all came crashing down during the Asian financial crisis, you had stocks. I think it's even extended to like 2000, 2003, stocks that were trading at 1 ringgit, 2 ringgit, 10 ringgit, but now are like 0.05 cents or even PN17 listed. So I think there's really generational trauma when we talk about just the finance sphere in general, and then you add on things that, the 2008 financial crisis, or even hearing how crypto goes boom, bank run. So I think there's a lot of fear, and I think that can be alleviated through really just studying it and understanding it. That's how you reduce it.
You meant that is with regards to, I guess, the current climate of things, right? Where youths especially are not really, allowed to save, I guess, in a way, because or save or invest or not break the bank, for example, because of all these emergency funds, for example. But what about financial literacy in general? Is it, you think, are they not being taught that, or are they not exposed to it, or do they not care about it? What is the overall sentiment around financial literacy?
My issue with financial literacy is, I think what's really promising is right now we're discussing financial literacy, and by doing that, I think we're doing a lot to generate awareness. But I think really when we talk about finances, there's too much surface level discussions that don't take into account the complex world we're living in. Like when it comes to financial literacy, sometimes all people can sort of prod on is sikit-sikit lama-lama jadi bukit. So, okay, so what? Cool. What else? Save money for a rainy day. Okay, but how do I do that? So I think we need to move far deeper rather than just surface level discussions of financial literacy, because I think people are willing to learn. I think youths don't get enough credit for their willingness, but maybe sometimes people don't give them that space to sort of understand.
Yeah, we'll talk about that more when it comes to solutions later. Now, increase in bankruptcy among youth. This is, one of the things that's quite alarming that we found out, I think, last year when they revealed the statistics, right? It says between 2018 to 2022, over 20% of the 47,929 persons, so over 48,000 persons, 20% of that declared bankrupt during that period were under the age of 34, which is quite young if you think about it, being bankrupt at that age, right? I mean, I'm nearing that age, and to think about being bankrupt is something that it's like so alarming, so like wow, So is this part of the problem, is not knowing how to handle finances, or is it just bad luck, or is this part of the problem? Are they all interconnected?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions surrounding financial products, right? Where you have, especially credit cards may seem very attractive, but not all the terms and conditions are, people don't know the true cost of them, right? And then you have right now, I'm not going to shame which companies, but loans that are like, oh, get money quick. But then if you really dive into the details, you're paying like what, 20, 18% interest on those loans. And I think you touch on a really nice point about just youth bankruptcy in general. And it's kind of alarming because I think bankruptcy should be, so we should separate youth bankruptcy and companies going bankrupt, right? When companies go bankrupt, 9 times out of 10, it's probably just poor governance or fiscal mismanagement, right? And we don't really have a lot of empathy for that. But when youth go bankrupt, the questions we have to ask ourselves is, why are they going bankrupt, right? Is it because, if they had to take a loan, that's probably out of desperation, right? The cash flow is just not enough. So I think we need to sort of dig deeper and ask the questions, why do youths have to take out loans? Why can't they just rely on their own income?
Yeah. Okay, another touchy subject here. We're going to get to all of that later in the second part of the interview, when it comes to solutions. But another touchy subject here that, been floating around, debating around is EPF withdrawals. And youth right now, especially those who started working, are contributing to EPF. But we did mention just now that there was a lot of news announcement that savings are just not enough these days. It's not enough for retirement. So with the development of EPF right now, some wants to withdraw, some doesn't want the plan anymore. Do you think youth understand the implications of all this?
Okay, this is going to be a really interesting topic to dive into because, funnily enough, in 2022, we actually wrote an article about this. We wrote an article, and you can just Google and it should come up, why EPF withdrawals could have adverse long-term economic consequences for Malaysians. And I think, do we have time? I'm going to just dive into the quick thesis statement of it. So if someone doesn't understand the implications, hopefully you do then. But it's pretty simple to understand. If you have 200 ringgit now and you intend to save 200 ringgit for the future, but you withdraw that now, you don't have that in the future to fall down on. That's point number one. Yeah. Point number two, you're losing out on the magic of compounding, right? So historically, EPF has given, 5 to 6%, right? So in 14 years, that money would have doubled. So, if you withdrew 10,000 ringgit right now, in 14 years, not only are you losing out the 10,000 ringgit, but you're losing out on the additional 10,000 ringgit. Yeah. But also the other things we cover in the article, and credit to the people who actually voted, I just reviewed the thing, was Malaysia is an aging population, right? So if an aging population does not have enough a social safety net, that will cost the government and cost the, would it mean increase in tax revenues, opportunity costs, less spending in investment, more spending in supporting the older generation? That's basically the long-term consequences. And then I would also add with the EPF withdrawals, simply put, EPF is one of the biggest institutional investors in the Malaysian stock market scene, right? So if EPF has less money because everyone's withdrawing it, this means that one less institutional investor has less bullets, right, to put into the stock market. If there's less ammunition, there's less liquidity, and if there's less liquidity, it just means that the Malaysian stock market isn't as vibrant. So those are the long-term consequences. But I think, on the other hand, when we talk about EPF, we have to understand that when the government chose to do that in 2020, 2021, it was out of, and a lot of people, there was desperation, right? So I think we have to be empathetic and ask, why do Malaysians not have the emergency funds to weather that COVID storm? But when it comes to EPF, I would also add that I think it's just become really weirdly politicized.
That's another spectrum to it.
It's not a hill worth dying on. There are 50 other more interesting policy debates that you could get into, because it kind of seems like a bunch of children talking about a piggy bank, right? I should withdraw this. No, let's save it for the future. But I would say one more thing about EPF is it's just the government's policy on budget 2023, right? 2 things I found really encouraging. The first was they are topping up additional income to the additional contributions to those in the lower bracket holes. That's really cool. The second thing I would highlight, are you aware of the iSaran initiative?
Yeah, I think so. I think we've heard of it.
That's really cool. Not really cool, I guess, but if you're unemployed or more importantly, I think the exact wording is if you don't have a constant contribution from an employer, if you're working in the gig economy, the government actually adds on about 300 ringgit to your EPF. So I think the EPF thing is something we should probably move on from, but those are the long-term implications, just the policy analysis. But I think Malaysian youth should look into these policies put forth by the government to, maximize their EPF savings.
So be more, hyper aware of this sort of things that are going on. All right, there's more to discuss after this break. Hi and welcome back to It's About Youth. I'm joined by Noor Haq Bahari from Fly Malaysia, talking about financial literacy among youth. Now, before we discuss, solutions-wise to sort of the problems that we discussed just now, I want to know personally, like, how did you get into all this? Like, how did Fly Malaysia, per se, was established to disseminate this kind of information to youth? What drives you guys?
So speaking, I guess as an organization, it was started by two students in 2016, just out of uni, and they saw this gap about financial literacy. And back in the day, it was mostly dealing with seminars directly to underprivileged students, a bunch of CSR programs. But in 2020, we sort of shifted because of the pandemic. We doubled down on online and made a bunch of research articles, infographics, content. But I think what really drives us is we're just uni students looking out for other Malaysians. We are I've been in this organization since November 2020. And a joke that goes around is I have a degree in Fly right now as well. But it's just a bunch of Malaysians coming together to sort of, part of it is upskill themselves, but we're all united by a mission to help other Malaysians with increasing their own financial literacy.
And that's a very nice sentiment, people helping each other, people out, right? So talking about, helping people out, when it comes to financial education, should it be something that's being taught in schools, for example? How do we start with exposing youth to financial education or financial literacy? Do we, for example, start in unis, start in schools? And if you mind sharing, what are some of the critical areas or gaps that you think you might not have a grasp on right now?
I would say the school point is very interesting because the government's actually done decent work here. When we were making this financial literacy booklet, we basically looked at the Form 4 and Form 5 syllabus, and there are a lot of budgeting, saving, stuff, like a financial literacy elements in the syllabus, right? And also I think a big part of studying mathematics, whether it be how compounding works or, problem solving, the questions seem really stupid at the time about a guy with 50 pineapples in a trolley, but there's some element of problem solving there. But
it's very minute though. I don't think people can catch that.
But even if we were to introduce a financial education syllabus tomorrow, my worry is that we're adding more things for teachers to sort of have to teach when there's already a lot of stuff that's just being added to the syllabus, right? So if there was I think if we were to make a financial education subject, we would need to sort of make sure the teachers are supported in ensuring the delivery is effective. But I really think the best way to start financial literacy is at home, right? I would say that parents have a responsibility to discuss with kids. And again, when I was going on about the surface level discussions about your grandparents might go, don't spend money, don't save, dive a lot more deeper to that. Show them the finances at home, budgeting. Show them what financial plans. Do I have to pay off this mortgage? Do I have to pay off this car loan? I think if we invite kids to the conversation and actually engage them to think critically and create awareness surrounding it all, I think it go a long way rather than just hoping the government does something.
Yeah, I think for me personally, and I think I can attest this for a lot of people who transition from, say, uni life and then working life and then married life and all that, there's always more things that we don't know about. Say, for example, we started doing tax and it's like, oh my God, I don't know how to do tax. Or, investment and all that. And it's worrying that there's a lot of things that we don't know about, especially when this kind of things we need to know by that time, right? When we transition into working life, adult life and all that. So just based off that, what are some of the critical, I mentioned just now, like I asked just now, what are some of the critical gaps or areas that you feel that youth must pay attention to, especially as they transition, to working life, adult life and all that?
I would say for me, I'm a big proponent of investing, I think. Because, I don't know who made this quote. I like to believe I made it up, but it's, what was it? Investing is like planting, right? So when you plant stuff, trees, obviously some don't grow, but some grow decently, but some suddenly are like huge, giant apple trees, right? But the one thing that is certain is that if you don't plant anything, it just won't, you won't get anything. And I would say, in Malaysia, we're kind of lucky to have avenues like ASB or ASN, where you're almost guaranteed a 4 to 5% investment. So I would say Malaysian youth should really try and understand investment and not be fearful of it, because even thinking about the stock market, Obviously, there's anytime you invest in something, there is a risk, but there is a beauty to it. I find it quite democratizing, where you can use your own funds to vote in companies that you believe in,
Yeah.
right? I'm thinking of, I had a friend who likes this athletic company in 2019, and we were just like window shopping, and I was like, "Oh, why is this so mahal? Like, this thing is kind of dumb." But then the stock of that company rose like exponentially. So I guess I'm the dumb one for not investing in that. So I think we just have to sort of dip our toes into the water a bit more and start engaging with in investment. But there's a lot more other stuff. You said taxes. I
Yeah.
don't think people know about CITOs, credit scores.
yeah,
There's
yeah,
a
definitely.
bajillion things, but I think that's part of the life, the process really. There's always
Yeah.
something to learn. You always will be a student on some
So
level.
making this process easier, making this process of knowing all this thing about investment, about wealth, about retirement savings and all that, how do we make it easier? So how should we approach, making financial literacy an important part of youth's lives? Should there be more awareness programs? Should there be more incentives, for example?
I think a fun, crazy idea I was talking with a friend was, what if every Malaysian got money that they had to invest in? But that's probably not the
It's like
most.
compulsory. I'll give you this.
Yeah, I mean, that's not probably the best idea,
Yeah.
really. But again, I don't get paid the big bucks to make policy decisions. But I would say, I think raising awareness is the most important. That's why, we're delighted that you guys invited us on this program, and we're just able to talk about it. And when it comes to awareness, I'd say to anyone listening out there that they should take that first step. Just have any conversation regarding finances. Put aside some other conversations and ask your friends, do you have any financial plans? What are your financial goals? That sort of thing. So I think raising awareness is the most feasible first step.
Most feasible. All right. Talking about, you mentioned just now, you said the government has done quite a decent front on all this. We'd like to discuss a bit more on that in terms of more support that they can do. Like I said just now, probably incentivizing people to do more in terms of investments or wealth and all that. What are your hopes for the government in terms of supporting youths who may want to go into, getting more knowledge on financial literacy?
I think I'm just going to give some more shout outs, I guess, to the government on this front, because are you aware of the Financial Education Network?
No.
So the Financial Education Network is one of our partners, is a interagency organization co-chaired by the Bank Negara and Securities Commission. So they do a lot of really good work with the from what I've seen, I think they do a lot of good grassroots work, right? So they have roadshows around Malaysia that raise awareness of financial literacy and financial planning. They have like a really cool bus that you can actually, I think, talk to someone about financial planning. And within the Financial Education Network, we've been exposed to so many other partners. There are other NGOs who are doing work maybe even better than us when it comes to raising awareness on this front. And, companies as well. They have a lot of CSR outreach programs that do that. But I don't know why there's a disconnect between, people who are aware of this sort of thing and not. I don't know if throwing more money at it maybe is the right answer. But I really don't, if the government could solve financial illiteracy, it already would have done so. That's my thought process. So I really think the onus is on us to raise awareness amongst our friends, amongst our family, amongst our peers. But I would say one thing that the government can do, which you could say is a quick win, is I think we need a shift in a cultural mindset when it comes to finances, right? Like, I've gone on about investing, but the truth of the matter is what got me to a process of being comfortable enough was because I failed a lot of times, and that means paying the tuition fees. I've lost a lot of money, like from really stupid investments. But part of the process is failure. Learning from your mistakes and coming back even stronger. But I speak from a place of privilege, right?
Yeah.
From someone who's underprivileged.
It's a lot of risks to actually for them to invest sometimes, because you mentioned the disconnect just now. The disconnect is probably because all the factors that you mentioned just now, cost of living, having not enough funds to begin with. So yeah.
The one thing I also add to that is, for someone less privileged, failure is catastrophic. Failure is the end for them.
Absolutely.
For example, if they take out a loan that they had to do it out of desperation, and they are unable to pay back, the credit score is gone. They are essentially financially excluded from the system. And, being financially excluded is one thing. Who they're going to go run to for money? They're going to run to loan sharks. So it's sort of, again, generational. The cycle of poverty really never ends. So if the government could do, or just not even the government, but collectively as a society, I think we just need to have a lot more empathy and talk more openly about failure as part of the process. And through failure, success is born.
All right. We'll almost come to an end, but last message for youth on this topic. And if you have anything that you can share with the youth to help them be more aware of this or be more financially literate. Go on.
I would say, okay, is to, use social media as a way to stay on target of achieving your financial goals. There are a lot of really good Malaysian personal finance creators. So instead of following, I don't know, any other thing on Twitter, why don't you follow some really good people who do really good work when it comes to the personal finance sphere. So I guess I don't think they know me, but I'll give shout outs to creators like Mr. Money TV, Ringgit or Ringgit, Mr. Stingy, TradeView, and even Her Do It, which is a Instagram page that's trying to talk about finance through the female perspective. I'm not a female, but I think it's, when I scroll through Instagram and I see a post reminding me to save, that subconsciously puts off something of me going, oh yeah, maybe I'll hold off on this purchase. But also, follow us, that'd be great. We have an Instagram page at Fly Youths. We have our website, flymalaysia.org. And I'm not just saying follow us to follow us, right? When we have an audience, that sort of incentivizes and drives us to make content. So if you want, you can just DM us directly and say what you really want to see. And then the third thing I would add is...
There's also a guideline for people.
This was a booklet, a labor of love between four of us. So myself, one person, Zine, designed this whole thing, illustrated this whole thing on Photoshop, and then Farhana and Emil helped me with translation and the content, right? So it's available on our website, and it's just, I think, a pretty comprehensive booklet that covers budgeting, saving, investing, taxation, what do banks do, credit cards, and all that good stuff. And it's free on the website. It costs you nothing to go and read this. I think a Form 3, Form 1 student could read it. I've given it to kids like in primary 6. So, good luck with the financial literacy journey in this complex world, I guess.
That is a very good initiative. And I hope that, more people can take, advice from this talk show and from the book as well, to just be more aware of where their money goes and how to spend it and how to save it for a rainy day or a later day. So that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for joining us.